Mira Lansing arrived at the Palisade Community Center the way spring arrives in a winter-weary city, with color, with noise, and with an unmistakable scent of change. At 47, she still carried the upright spine of a ballet mistress, though the cartilage between two vertebrae had thinned enough to persuade her Manhattan agent that Broadway was done with her. She, however, was not done with dance. When her older sister emailed that the community center in their New Jersey hometown had money for a 6-week creative aging project, Mira packed her leotards and her grudges and said yes before the ink was dry on the grant. The first afternoon she unlocked Studio B, formerly a racquetball court. It smelled of disinfectant and dust. She opened the lone window, rolled up the vinyl blinds, and let sunlight stripe the floor. The seniors would arrive in 20 minutes, and all she knew of them were the names typed by the center's receptionist. Carlotta Reyes, 72 Earl Dayton, 68 Dr. Kavita Rao, 75 Hugo Mendel, 79 Jerome Lee, 70 Yvonne Toussaint, 73 6 strangers, 6 pensions, 6 sets of arthritic joints. The grant language required a culminating public showing. Mira had pitched something nebulous about translating memories into movement. Now she had to figure out what that meant. A hesitant knock preceded the first arrival. Dr. Rao entered in pressed chinos and orthopedic sneakers, her salt and pepper hair tied into a no-nonsense bun. She carried a leather notebook and a small bottle of ibuprofen. "I was a surgeon," she announced, as though clarifying rank on a battlefield. "Wonderful," Mira said, extending a hand. "I was a dancer. Today we're both beginners." Dr. Rao's eyebrow rose, equal parts skepticism and curiosity. The others trickled in. Earl, the lanky retired mailman with post office knees. Hugo, whose handshake felt like iron forged. Carlotta, whose lipstick was a perfect crimson. Jerome Lee, whose hearing aids flashed blue when he smiled. And Yvonne Toussaint, who kept glancing over her shoulder as if a ghost might follow her inside. They formed a crooked semicircle. Mira inhaled. "Welcome to Stage of Age. For 6 weeks we'll craft a dance built from your life stories. Think of it as autobiography told by the body. Age is not a cage, it's a stage." Silence. A fluorescent bulb hummed overhead. Then Earl asked, "You mean like, we're going to boogie to our tax returns?" Mira laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe you'll discover movement in the way you once sorted letters, or forged steel, or stitched silk, or wrote love notes." She clapped once. "Shoes off if you can, chairs against the wall. Let's begin." Week 1, Foundations. She started with breath. On Mira's cue, they inhaled, arms floating up like kites, then exhaled, arms drifting down. Simple, non-threatening. Yet Hugo's right shoulder protested. Dr. Rao's ribcage barely expanded, and Jerome apologized each time his knee cracked as though joints should be polite. Mira taught a technique she called memory gesture. Each dancer chose an everyday action from years past and exaggerated it into deliberate motion. Earl's mail sorting became a swivel of the torso and a sharp flick of the wrist. Carlotta's sewing was a forward bend, a reach, a delicate pull. Hugo hammered overhead, pausing every few swings to wipe imaginary sweat. They practiced facing mirrors and then facing one another. By the end of the hour, the room felt lighter, though no one admitted it. Yvonne lingered at the door. "My husband used to waltz," she murmured. "I'm not sure I can dance without him." "Bring him with you," Mira said. "In your memory." Yvonne nodded, but tears filigreed her lashes. Week 2, Story Circles. Mira placed 6 folding chairs in a circle. "Today we share one turning point from our lives. We'll listen, then we'll find its rhythm." Carlotta went first. Her parents had arrived from Puerto Rico in 1950. She'd learned English by listening to jukeboxes in the garment district. Music saved me, she said, and sewing paid the rent. I made wedding gowns for women who could not afford them. Every stitch carried hope. Hugo spoke next. He had forged steel beams for bridges up and down the East Coast. I built things that outlive people, he said with quiet pride. His palms bore maps of old burns. Dr. Rao told how she'd removed a tumor from a 6-year-old boy on her 50th birthday. Precision is its own language, she said. The scalpel must listen to the heartbeat. Earl recounted 37 Christmases of delivering last-minute packages in snowstorms. The bell ringin', the dogs barkin', and kids peekin' through curtains. His eyes crinkled. Jerome's story was shorter. In 1972, he'd fallen in love with Lawrence, a fellow architecture student. For decades, they pretended to be roommates. We built rooms for other people, but none big enough to hold us, he said, voice trembling. Yvonne waited until everyone else had spoken. Henri was a saxophonist, she whispered. We met at a dance hall in New Orleans. He'd play a riff, I'd answer with steps. Hurricane Katrina took our house. Cancer took him. I moved north because the silence was too loud. Mira listened, goose flesh racing along her forearms. She felt the choreography assembling itself like origami. Steel beams, wedding gowns, scalpel incisions, Christmas bells, hidden rooms, and a lonely waltz. Week 3, Vocabulary. The retirees learned to name pathways, lateral, sagittal, diagonal, and to think of space as a canvas. Mira paired them off to improvise duets. Dr. Rao and Earl discovered that passing an invisible parcel between them mirrored surgery and mail alike, an exchange of responsibility. Yvonne and Hugo found tempo in the contrast between her glide and his strike, as though brass and percussion were composing a jazz conversation. Mira demonstrated how to turn small gestures into motifs. Carlotta's stitch became a ripple down her arm, then transferred to Jerome, who folded the ripple into an architectural angle over his head. The group laughed when a movement traveled around the circle like gossip. During water breaks, they swapped tips on knee braces and cholesterol medication. They debated whether the center's vending machine granola bars counted as health food. Mira stayed out of those arguments, knowing camaraderie fermented when teachers kept quiet. At night, she choreographed alone in her childhood bedroom, now a storage space for her mother's quilts. She laid index cards on the floor. Aki Origins, Aki 2, Storm, Aki 3, Bridge. Each dancer's memories served as colors. Her job was to blend them without dulling the hues. Yet fear gnawed her ribs. These were not pliable 20-year-olds. They tired. They ached. One fall could end the project and perhaps end a hip. Mira added contingency plans, chairs as props, rest beats woven into music, a physical therapist on speed dial. Week 4, Setbacks. Midway through the 4th session, Jerome winced after a pivot. He tried to hide the pain, but his left knee buckled. Mira rushed forward. Jerome waved her off. Old injury, he muttered. Vietnam comes and goes. Mira ordered everyone to the wall for stretching. She felt the room's truss teeter like scaffolding. A single miscalculation, and they'd return to bingo nights. When class ended, she walked Jerome to his car. I can modify the part, she said. Keep you seated, let the others move around you. And make me scenery? He snorted. But then his gaze softened. I want to dance standing, Mira. Just show me how to do it safely. They agreed on a physician visit and a lighter load. Still, fatigue spread among the troupe like an unseen draft. Hugo complained of insomnia. Carlotta missed a class to babysit her granddaughter. Dr. Rao faintly criticized Mira's counts. Too fast, too slow? Choose a pulse, young lady? One evening, Mira collapsed on the living room couch beside her sister Bee, who was knitting socks. "They're falling apart," Mira groaned. "I'm asking too much." "You're asking them to live big," Bee replied, needles clicking. "That feels like too much only when you've lived small for a while." Mira lay awake, recalling her last Broadway audition. The director had said, "Beautiful, but we're casting fresh energy." Age had caged her then. Now she taught others that it need not. Hypocrisy or redemption? She resolved to push on. Week 5. Polishing. They rehearsed 3 days a week. Mira projected conviction even when ibuprofen bottles rattled like maracas in the dancers' bags. Opening tableau, 6 chairs in a line, spotlight amber. One by one, dancers rose to share their origin gesture. Sewing, sorting, hammering, scalpel, trumpet arms, blueprint reach. Then sat. Music, a low heartbeat played on cello. Second section, storm. The chairs scattered, movement quickened. Carlotta's ripple collided with Hugo's hammer, sending an unseen beam crashing. Yvonne's waltz fought for melody against hurricane samples woven into the score. Dr. Rao sliced space with her hands, precise, urgent. Earls's swivel delivered invisible letters of loss. Lights flickered blue-white like lightning. Third section, bridge. Jerome stepped onto an imaginary girder created by Hugo's outstretched arms. Carlotta stitched the air, weaving paths for people to meet. Dr. Rao and Earl partnered, pulse slowing, breath communal. Yvonne advanced, her arms offering a ghostly embrace, and the group caught her, holding shape until the lights dimmed. Mira added a coda. All 6 faced the audience, lifted their left hands, and opened fists into blossoms. Simple, universal. During runs, mistakes crept in. Earl reversed his swivel. Carlotta hesitated before a turn. Hugo's shoulders spasmed. Mira corrected them with the patience she rarely afforded herself. With each rehearsal, the dance looked less like retirees trying to recall steps and more like humans remembering they had bodies. Dress rehearsal brought music cues, borrowed lighting instruments, and a small crisis when the custodians misplaced the folding chairs. The group practiced without them, improvising new levels, kneeling, crouching, hovering. Mira watched, astonished. They didn't break. They adapted. Show day. The Palisade. Spring Arts Gala drew a cross-section of locals, parents clutching smartphones, teenagers in band t-shirts, aldermen hungry for photo ops. Inside the old auditorium, the audience smelled of popcorn and perfume. Backstage, Mira's dancers warmed joints with gentle circles. Jerome wore a knee brace beneath black slacks. Hugo's granddaughter had braided silver ribbon through his thinning hair. Carlotta's lipstick matched her vintage flamenco skirt. Dr. Rao carried no notebook tonight, only muscle memory. Yvonne clutched a weathered photograph of Henri in his tuxedo. She kissed the image, tucked it into her bodice, and whispered, "One more song, Cher?" Mira gathered them in a huddle. "Remember, dance the story, not the steps. If something goes wrong, use it. You're telling the truth of living. Truth has no perfect take." She led them in one synchronized exhale. The house lights dimmed. A hush spread like silk being laid on a cutting table. Act 1 spotlight on 6 chairs. The heartbeat cello cued. Hugo rose first, hammer arc like sunrise. Hugo's palms steadied midair, holding a beam only he could see. Carlotta followed, bend, reach, pull. The memory of sewing lines into the cosmos. Earl's swivel and flick scattered letters that fluttered onto unseen doorsteps. Dr. Rao sliced a precise incision, then sutured it closed by sliding thumb to index finger. Jerome traced blueprints overhead, walls, windows, sky. Yvonne closed the sequence with a waltz step. weight shifting as if balancing on moonlit water. The audience remained silent, uncertain whether to clap. Mira peeked from wing, chest buzzing. Act 2, music cracked open, samples of storm sirens, saxophone fragments, hammer clangs. The dancers burst from chairs. Carlotta's ripple traveled to Dr. Rao, who redirected it toward Hugo. The collision. Hugo's hammer swung. Dr. Rao ducked. Earl jumped sideways to deliver an invisible, urgent letter. Yvonne spun, arms wide, a widow begging the wind not to take more than it already had. Jerome's blueprint arms collapsed. He stumbled, but turned the misstep into a kneel, tracing cracked foundations with trembling fingers. The auditorium inhaled collectively. The storm peaked in a lightning stroke blackout. When lights returned, chairs lay overturned, and 6 bodies panted, alive. Act 3. Silence first, then a lone saxophone note, recorded by Henri himself, Yvonne had revealed yesterday. Hugo extended his arms like twin girders. Jerome climbed upon the invisible bridge, steadied by Hugo's strength and his own will. Carlotta stitched space behind them, golden light spilling like thread. Dr. Rao and Earl circled, exchanging gestures, the surgeon trusting the postman to deliver steady hands, the postman surrendering his bundle to science. Yvonne approached center stage. She lifted her left hand, palm toward the sky, and the others followed. Fists opened in white light. Coda. They stood unified, not synonyms of old age, but paragraphs of experience. The final chord faded. For a moment, the auditorium remained mute, as if afraid applause might fracture the fragile miracle on stage. Then cheers lifted the rafters. Teenagers and aldermen alike rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Children pointed. "Grandma, you were dancing!" Backstage afterglow. Mira's troupe clustered into a sweaty embrace. Carlotta's mascara smudged tearfully onto Hugo's shoulder. Earl kissed Dr. Rao's hand. She allowed it, smiling. Jerome removed his knee brace with a flourish. "Still attached." Yvonne pulled Mira aside. "That note in Act 3, that was Henri's. You gave him back to me for 3 minutes." She pressed a small brass saxophone charm into Mira's palm. "Merci, mon ami." Center Director Andrea burst in. "Phenomenal! We need an encore next month. The newspaper wants interviews." Hugo chuckled. "Slow down, lady. I need a nap." But Mira saw sparks in his eyes, the kind that weld steel to destiny. She felt the group's energy circling like a baton waiting for its next relay. Epilogue. 6 months later. The dance became a traveling workshop. Senior centers, veterans halls, libraries. Each town contributed elders and stories. Mira's original 6 served as facilitators, mentors, heralds of possibility. At a YMCA in Philadelphia, Earl taught a 91-year-old how to swivel without knee pain. In Baltimore, Dr. Rao guided former nurses through a duet about CPR compressions. Carlotta designed scarves that doubled as props. Jerome drafted portable sets, collapsible bridges you could unpack from a sedan trunk. Hugo welded a rolling bar for balance exercises. Yvonne curated a playlist of regional love songs, insisting every locale had its own heartbeat. One evening, after a workshop in a converted church, they sat on folding chairs under stained glass. Mira asked them to share a current moment, not a memory, to turn into movement. They looked puzzled. She waited. Dr. Rao rose first, lifted her trembling right hand and placed it over her heart. Beat, beat, rest. Earl mirrored her, slower. Hugo followed, then Carlotta, Jerome, Yvonne. 6 heartbeats at different tempos, converging. Mira stepped in, 7th pulse. The sound of breath replaced the need for music. She realized then she was no longer their sole choreographer. She was a conduit. They choreographed themselves and in doing so choreographed time. On the drive back to New Jersey, Mira felt her own spine complain. She considered the MRI the orthopedist recommended, but she also remembered Earl's words. Age is a stage. Not an excuse, not a sentence, merely a platform waiting for light. At a red light, she extended her left hand, curled it into a fist, and let it bloom open. The gesture belonged to all of them now, a portable revelation. Green signal. She drove on, thinking of the next town, the next circle of chairs, the next story eager to be danced. The road ahead looked like a ribbon unspooled, ready for stitching,